I want to talk about Iran here. Overnight, President Trump canceling a pending attack against Tehran, holding off on these new strikes for now, saying that parameters were reached in a deal to end the war, reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What do you want to see in this deal, and do you believe that we're actually there?
Well, I think the president outlined the two key America First interests in Iran: an open Strait of Hormuz and no nuclear weapon. Now, the president is more engaged in these conversations than I am, and I trust his judgment absolutely. But what is clear is we can attack Iran at will. We can destroy whatever we want in Iran at will. But the destruction of Iran is not the goal. An open Strait of Hormuz and no nuclear weapon is. And if we can achieve those two objectives short of further military action, that is a win. And so I hope the president is on the right track here. I don't trust the Iranians. They have shown themselves to never be trustworthy. But again, the president's got more access to what's going on over there than I do, and I trust his decision making.
If the regime can't be trusted, why bother moving forward with negotiations?
There are a lot of regimes around the world that can't be trusted, yet we deal with them in a particular way. I don't know that Russia can be trusted. I don't know that China can be trusted, yet we don't always go to war with those countries. We need to simply make sure that our interests can be achieved, and those interests are no nuclear weapon and an open Strait of Hormuz. Bad people are in charge of lots of countries around the world. It's not our job to make sure we are in charge of everyone who runs every country. It's our job to make sure that American interests are followed, and those are what the American interests are in that part of the world.
What do you say to Americans, though, who have watched this back and forth, who have watched the president say there are strikes on the horizon, and then pull that back? And we've done this dance several times, sir. So what do you say to Americans who are concerned watching that and who are watching the impact here at home? They are facing the burden of higher cost and watching this drag out.
Yeah, look, I would say that we've been dealing with this not for a few months, but for 47 years. We've been dealing with these issues with Iran. And what people need to understand is this: Iran was spending huge amounts of money to build an intercontinental ballistic missile. That intercontinental ballistic missile only had one purpose. It was to deliver a nuclear weapon to the United States. They had all the missiles they needed to hit anywhere they wanted in Israel and the Middle East. That is a risk that the president has said we cannot face. And as much as it stinks to pay an extra $1 a gallon of gas, which I think will come down fairly shortly, think about the damage of a nuclear bomb going off in Washington or New York or Miami. That is the risk that we simply cannot face, and that is the risk that the president is dealing with right now.
But how much longer can Americans continue to carry that burden?
Until we win. I mean, look, that is the challenge.
What does winning look like then?
Winning looks like no nuclear weapons program and an open Strait of Hormuz. And the president continues to degrade Iran. One of the things the media doesn't cover is the state of play inside Iran. Iran is in an economic collapse. Their military has collapsed. And they are the ones who can't hold out for much longer, not the United States. This is not a self-sustaining country right now. We just need to be patient because we've been dealing with this for 47 years. We don't want to deal with it when a nuclear bomb goes off in one of our major cities.
How do you ensure that Iran no longer has those nuclear capabilities?
Well, it will require inspections and all kinds of things. Look, we know a lot about what's going on in Iran right now because of our intelligence capabilities. So we will know when those things are happening, but it will require national intervention. We can see, though, when countries that have been hostile to the United States become friendly to the United States. I was just in Venezuela a few days ago on the first CODEL since Maduro left power, and you can see a 180 in how this government, who is incredibly hostile to the United States, recognizes the benefits of being friendly to the United States. Hopefully, we can get to that same place in Iran.
But, sir, we've bombed their nuclear facilities twice over. So how many more times do we need to do that to ensure that they no longer have these capabilities?
Well, it's not about bombing the facilities. It's making sure they don't start rebuilding them. And there's still the rubble, and there's still some of that capability still existing in that country. We need them to give up the goal of getting these nuclear weapons. We will know it when they say they stop, and when we have the capabilities to investigate that they are no longer doing it.
I want to ask you quickly, too, because I've spoken with some now retired members of the U.S. military who believe that the next step will very likely be U.S. troops on the ground. Do you agree? Is the next step troops on the ground?
Well, I don't know who you're hearing that from. No one is talking about troops on the ground in Iran. Absolutely nobody. No one in Congress.
We just
no
spoke with Lieutenant General Richard Newton in our last hour, who said he believed that troops on the ground could be at least a part of the next step.
Well, good for him, but that's not something I hear anybody discussing in either party at any level right now.
Are military strikes the only option, though, here? What is the off-ramp for the U.S.?
Well, I think you're hearing it right now when the president is talking about diplomacy. That's always the goal of diplomacy, but it is to make clear to the mainstream Muslim leaders who run Iran that we are not going to let this ideology that calls for the destruction of Western civilization take hold. We're simply not going to allow it, and we'll continue to do whatever is necessary to stop it. I'm hopeful that we will get there, but one way or another, they're going to give up their nuclear ambitions. It's only whether it's with a pen or with a bomb. Either way, they're not going to have them.
Back here at home, President Trump is demanding that senators stay in D.C., not go on recess until the Save America Act is passed. You have said, sir, that senators should be willing to stay in their seats for as long as it takes. Have you spoken to your Senate Republican colleagues about getting this deal done? What's happening behind the scenes?
Well, I have. And my two great senators in Florida, Senator Rick Scott and Ashley Moody, they agree with me. They want to stay in Washington until the deal is done. So those of us in Florida aren't the issue. The fact is this. In the 1960s, senators remained in Washington 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 60 days to make sure that every American had the right to vote. It is worth them doing the same to make sure that only Americans have the right to vote. That's why I vote for the Save America Act 6 times. And frankly, as Politico is reporting that the New Jersey voter registration system operates on the honor system. It is literally the honor system is how they determine whether you're an American citizen or not. Americans are concerned about honesty and accuracy in our elections. The Save America Act will restore that, and the Senate needs to stay as long as it takes to get that bill passed.
Okay. Florida Republican Congressman Randy Fine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.